is too simplistic. French's third point is that India's contradictions are less confusing to Indians than they are to foreigners. And the example that he's giving here is in the West, particularly in the United States, we think about sort of religion and science being opposing to one another, right? Yeah. And we have that tension that comes up a lot in the U.S. Whereas in India, there can be contradictions between religion and science side by side, and nobody seems to bother about it. There's, you can do your religious thing, and you can also be a scientist, and it doesn't matter if these things don't match up perfectly. There's a lot of tolerance for that, right? And openness.
Scientists are very religious-minded.
That's
what
true.
You're saying.
In many cases, they are. Yeah. So being a scientist doesn't mean you give up religion. The fourth myth is the idea of women being oppressed in India. Now, of course, we know that there's a reality of sexism and patriarchy in Indian culture, but there are also some incredibly powerful women in India in business and in politics, and you can easily lose sight of that if you go by just the stereotype of what Indian women are.
They have the most women leaders around the world.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly.
They're the first prime minister, woman prime minister.
So there are many examples like that we can look at. And the last example that French gives is that India has an odd form of representative democracy and probably doesn't get enough credit for that representative democracy that is operating in a very complex and diverse environment, but yet it is, in fact, democratic. And so whenever you talk about India and China and the global Asian giants, right, in the world today, you have to keep in mind that India is democratic.
I was interested in reading what is going on in India at present time with Baba Ramdev and Hazare. They have gone on hunger strike to bring the corruption in control under a bill called Lokpal or something like that. Corruption, by the way, was always a civil problem. It was never a criminal problem. This is the first time they're discussing that corruption should be criminalized. In other words, if you're taking money, you're taking bribes, you should go to jail. First time.
And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I hope they come up with it. So maybe that myth will be good then, Folks, I don't know, but I watch Food Network. Now we have 2 channels to watch Food Network. And what it has done is it's excited me to go ahead and start cooking.
Really?
And I actually cook. And I am pretty good at a couple of items, but I do cook. But I'd love to learn because now I'm at a stage where I can say, look, I can go on a vacation and sure enough, I can learn cooking. And there are plenty of, according to Fortune magazine, there are plenty of travel agencies that'll actually set you up whether you want to learn Italian cooking or French cooking or Spanish cooking. I have even seen an ad for Indian cooking. They'll take you to India in these high places, 5-star hotels, and the chefs will teach you. I like that idea. I believe the Institute of Cooking in California, they have a site in California, they have a site in New York. What they're trying to do is inviting you to come on, whether you want to just do it for one day or you do it for a week. They will teach you how to cook. And men have started liking it, which should help women, really, because they no longer have to say, hey, I'm coming tired, you want me to cook, why don't you order from outside? But men are saying, no outside food, I can cook, So the roles are changing, but it's most exciting to see how Food Network is changing our lives.
Well, you know what? Food is such an important part of culture, right? And in many cultures, food is love. It's how you express that you care for other people. Right. And it's also art. There's so much that goes into preparing a meal and understanding not just the science of it, but the art of it as well. So it makes a lot of sense that tourists traveling abroad would want to learn more deeply about the food culture of another country. Not just visiting monuments and museums, but actually getting to experience the food and learn how to make it yourself. Well, here's something to laugh about. In Saudi Arabia, the television channels are not necessarily that interesting for young people. They get to watch, the same old soap operas and news content. But what about comedy? And that too, stand-up comedy. You don't really see it on television, but you will see it on YouTube. And it's becoming increasingly popular among young people in Saudi Arabia. There are a couple of examples in particular that are really taking off. One of them is called On the Fly, and another one is called Zip It. And there are, 20-somethings who are doing their stand-up routines and comedy sketches on these small YouTube videos. And whereas before, a lot of the comedy was in English, more for an Arab American audience, really, than for people living in Saudi Arabia, now you've got much more comedy produced in Arabic language for young people in that country. And they're taking on some of the tough issues. Like, for example, when the Florida pastor here in the U.S., Terry Jones, was burning Qurans, we know that was a pretty terrible time. And, how does a comedy show in Saudi Arabia deal with something like this?
They have to diffuse that situation.
Yeah, they had to make fun of him, right? And so on the Zip It show, Mr. Jones, they show him mistakenly igniting some Bibles and some children's books, and basically what they suggest that if any book is written in Arabic, he probably thought it was a Quran and would burn it. So they're suggesting, hey, Saudi high school students, send them your biology textbooks. They'll see the Arabic and think they need to burn those too. So they're really kind of poking fun at these things that normally we would find hurtful or offensive and making light of them. And it's just a new kind of media that's getting popular there.
Voice of America also had a comedy show that was actually being shown around the world, and it is two Iranian guys, and it is sent to Iran. It is so funny that they turned it into YouTube now. Before it was only audio, now it is YouTube, and that's the most watched show in Iran.
Wow.
Even last week, I remember I read it in Washington Post, Hillary Rodham Clinton was a single fan of this Middle East comic, and she wanted to know, how do you make Middle Easterns laugh? She wanted to learn firsthand, so she had him in her spacious office, and she was the only audience. I thought that was the funniest thing I heard.
Well, that's about all we have for you this week on Darshan America. Thank you so much for joining us.
Namaste.
Namaste.